Hi, Meryl.
Hello, Paul.
So today the Curriculum and Assessment Review report has dropped. Do you want to talk a bit more about how it's come about?
The Curriculum and Assessment Review with Becky Francis and a panel has been going on for over a year now. And so they had a curriculum roadshow last November, I think it was. And so they've spoken to thousands of teachers, parents. They've collected in data. They've spoken to lots of organisations. So they've literally looked piece by piece across what our curriculum is in England and how we assess young people. What are the holes? What are the wins? What's going well? What's not going well?
Yeah.
And so, obviously, for us, it was all for us, we were really focusing on what's going to change for climate education, nature education, and how we're going to get young people to understand what sustainability is.
Yeah, and guess we should say that the scope of this, it didn't include early years. It didn't go too far at the top end. There was sort of limits to this as well. There were sort of boundaries, which I guess is understandable in that otherwise the scope of this is just ridiculous. You had a moment during the roadshow, didn't you, where you dropped a banner? So
I
we've kind
did
of
drop a
shared our
banner.
piece as well, haven't we?
Yeah, so warming stripes. We know our planet is rapidly changing. We know that at the moment we're overshot 1.5 degrees, and actually, this curriculum that they're proposing is going to come in 2027.
Okay.
And
So you're
we
getting into the first bit, Meryl, time
Oh, sorry.
frames. So basically, it's taken a year for them to do this process. And then even now, you're saying that the curriculum won't be enacted, any of these changes won't be seen in schools until what year?
2027, and
Well,
that's if
2028,
teachers,
isn't it? By the time it actually
yeah.
goes, it'll be 2028. So we've got 3 years from now. That's partly because there's lots of stuff to happen from taking this. So it was an independent report. The government have responded. They then kind of take on board the feedback. We've seen already there's tenders out for changes to curriculum, to rewriting curriculum within specific subject areas. So there'll be a process of rewriting, and then those things will then be taken on board by exam boards. They'll then have to sort of adapt. Exam
So,
specs, all
so
that sort of thing.
the report that came out today is the final report, and it's 197 pages long.
Wow. Okay. And we have to be honest and say we've not read every word, and I'm not sure who will. But what we have done is given it a good overview, good skim.
And
And
what's been really interesting today, very early in the morning, is people's response to it, and
yes.
what
So
people are
hot
saying.
takes, Meryl. What have we got so far? Should we read out some of, particularly in the climate and nature space, what have people been saying?
So generally, people seem relatively pleased with what's going on. It's positive. There are mentions of climate and sustainability more than there were, you know.
Yeah. Let's name some people then. So what we've got,
So
Sylvia Knight. What?
Quinn Runkle
Oh, Quinn,
from
sorry.
Teach Future and SOS. She was definitely, even though SOS and other organisations such as Global Action Plan have been talking about we need to embed it across the curriculum. We need sustainability. We need climate across the curriculum. So it's because it's so big. It's such
Yeah.
a difficult concept for science and geography.
Hmm.
And so lots of organisations, the Institute of Education at UCL, Global Action Plan, Students Organising Sustainability have all been pushing for across the curriculum, and that's not there.
Okay, so we definitely can say it's not broad. So what Quinn has said is that it's good news for sustainability and climate within geography, citizenship, and science. And I think that's one of the key takeaways is actually climate and nature education is still within the bounds of geography and science. And then now there's this priority or reprioritizing of citizenship, which I guess is probably also seen within the wider context of what's going on in the UK, in the world, around populism and the political position. Yeah.
And actually, one of the things that you can come out is that Global Action Plan are very much promoting through their projects such as Good Life School active citizenship. And Dr. Ali Body is actually her work has been quoted in this report because active citizenship, we need young people to really engage them with what's going on. We need them to be active, allowed time to be active citizens and understand what that means.
And I
So I
think then
think like
that's where Morgan Phillips' feedback comes, sort of saying actually this should be seen as a good thing. It's not necessarily all about explicitly linking it to climate and nature. It's this critical thinking. It's about wider values and skills,
Yeah,
and
because
that
it's not
yeah.
just the climate and biodiversity crisis that we're interested in. It's that social inequality and the use of media and pulling out misinformation. There's so much that we is changing our world that we need people to stay up. So
Mhm.
and actually Morgan pointed out in a LinkedIn post that in the launch video, Becky Francis has actually said climate science. So, the DFE are not scared about saying we need climate in education now. That's great.
Have you got the quote from Sylvia Knight as well? Was it there was a particular sentence, a phrase that
You
Sylvia
might,
was
yeah.
excited by?
Hold on. It might take me a moment to find this
Well,
one. You
whilst
might
you're
need to.
doing that, there is we've got the kind of Freddie at Teach the Future um, email that's gone out to all their supporters, and they've picked up on the idea that climate change and sustainability is listed as one of the five key skills and knowledge areas. So it's definitely there's a kind of raising its importance priority, and as well as science, geography, and citizenship, they've also noted this idea that the DT curriculum, and that's something I know that there's a few people have been exploring and working on that and developing greater sustainability emphasis in DT. Emphasis on improving enrichment, which I think the government acknowledged maybe some schools, because of other pressures, had diminished. And so there's this reprioritizing of enrichment. And that's also where then we've got civic engagement and then nature, outdoor, and adventure that are then emphasized within this, which again kind of feels like a nod to it's a sort of here's a little bit of progress.
Fine.
But in terms
And
of
we
what we're not suggesting here is that every single young person will spend more time outside or that they will engage in their local community through civic kind of projects and
and
political
actually, it's
engagement.
really tricky for schools to take children outside into nature because, if you need a minibus to do anything or a coach to do anything, it's exorbitantly expensive. So, and most schools are really struggling financially. So to say this is where we're going, it's fine, but I can't, we'll need a huge amount of support from DFE, central government funding, and I just don't know where that's going to come from. But Quinn has actually said, Cassie, who's a member of this environmental education group that we speak to a lot online and things. Cassie Wiles has said, shame it didn't go further on climate-related issues, even more cross-curricular. And Quinn does say she absolutely totally agrees. We wanted it to be integration of solution-centered sustainability and climate change education across all subjects. But I think just that relief that at least it's been included, which is a terrible position to be in, that we're actually relieved that
Yeah.
it's there to a certain extent. You're gonna have to
This is
cut me
then one
out.
of the things that we I think so our position is look, any movement is good movement, but it's just not as far as we want it or need it to be. And
So I
sorry.
found Sylvia Knight's. So because I put up a picture yesterday of me talking to a skeleton effectively because I'm just fed up of fossil fuels and waiting for climate change education. And then this comes out this morning, so I was very timely. But so I said I'm not sure I really want to read this report, and Sylvia wrote, we don't think it's so bad. So Professor Sylvia
Mm.
Knight is head of education at the Royal Meteorological Society. We don't think it's so bad. There is a great line that engaging climate lends to existing curriculum content, which gives a lot of space. So if you are teaching in RE or in DT or in any subject, that's not science and geography, you can still look at things through a climate lens. And I think that's really
Is
important.
this one of the problems with the nature of these types of reports, though? It's about the nuance of the language, and there's so many stages where this needs to be interpreted by exam boards or by subjects organizations or by teachers in the classroom, and it's that level of nuance that actually stuff can get lost. So should it be more explicitly mentioned? Is
Yeah.
that its downfall as well?
What's lovely alongside these little, those bits that we do want to see, that active citizenship, climate and sustainability. What is good is that we've got, there is going to be more space. They're taking out 10% of the content of GCSEs. I'd quite like to get rid of GCSEs, to be honest, but we're not, and that's not a surprise. But they're going to slim them down a little bit so they're not so heavy, because we need time for dialogue. We need that time for discussion. There's my concern is, that we need to be grounded. We need that nature connection. We need young people to be outside in nature. And although there's talk about, extracurricular learning and opportunities, two problems with that. One is a lot of schools are still really going to struggle financially to deliver those. And two, teachers don't have the skills. We don't have the wherewithal to know how to do that or embed it. So, there's lots of nice to haves in this in a way, and this is going to be our curriculum. We're going to have to deliver it. But where's the training? Where's the funding? Where's the support for schools going to come
Yeah,
from?
how do we
Where's
enact it?
the
Yeah,
curriculum?
yeah, yeah. Um, Yeah, you're exactly right. And then I guess I'm just looking through the government response and picking out some other aspects of it. I think one of the interesting talking points is the idea that there's an emphasis on cooking and essentially food and nutrition in design technology, which again,
But
is something that we've been campaigning with around the soil education group and kind of food farming and sustainability. But again, it's a niche thing in the sense that who's going to take who how many students take design technology? How many are going to actually do this aspect of it? And the sense that we need to make this uniform for all students is sort of
And there's no
missed.
mention in that, oh, in food technology, you're going to be doing this. It's no mention about how we can eat sustainably. When, if you stick to the line on this, I know there's room for maneuver on it, but if you stick to the line on this national curriculum, if you've got a head teacher that's
Mm,
not particularly environmentally focused, you could still skirt around an awful lot of it. So that means that young people won't be getting an education that enables them to live sustainably or
mm,
understand really why. They'll be getting some climate science and then some geography about the causes and effects. But there's so much more we can do in schools. So, it's not a disaster, I wouldn't say at all. And I'd say it's probably about where I was expecting it. There was actually more mentions of climate than I guessed there would be.
hmm
Um, but yeah, no, it's going to be interesting. I mean, and 3 years, another 3 years before we get any real change in the classrooms.
mm,
I think for me, the planet is changing really. I mean, it's 16 degrees in Northumberland in November. I
yeah,
mean, it's just bizarre. And increasingly, we're going to see our social systems, our environmental systems unraveling. So if this curriculum comes in 2028, and it lasts the same length of time as the current curriculum has, that's 2043, 2045, and that our planet might be 3 degrees warmer by then.
mm,
So are the DFE going to allow us that flexibility to change what's going on in schools rapidly enough, or is
yeah.
this going to be a curriculum that just sits there for another 15 years, and then that's what we're left with in 2045,
Yeah.
on a very changed planet?
Yeah, I guess this goes back to the idea of how education change happens within the government sort of 4-year blocks, and
It's real inertia, and that's
yeah,
what. So it's I often liken it to the Titanic. We can see changes happening, we can see the icebergs melting effectively, but they're there, cause it, and you're trying to steer the Titanic away from it, and it's just the inertia, the length of
mm,
time things take. And I know the civil service, I've worked as a civil servant before, I know that can take a long time, but it's just there's that constant, it has to be, we have to move faster.
yeah. So I just obviously everything going on in the world is at a far greater pace than what's happening in education, and there's the greater and greater disconnect between the two. The similar story to the one you've got is that sense of my children now are about to go into secondary school, and I really thought by the time my children come to secondary education, it'll be different, and it very much feels like they're going to have the same experience as I had, decades and decades ago.
um yeah, let's face it, we know a lot about the science, and the trouble is, actually most teachers in most classrooms around the world, around our country, aren't necessarily staying quite abreast of how serious some of these issues are. We just had the second worst crop harvests on record, but it doesn't get in the news. So, why would they know? Why would they be concerned about that? We've always got this thought that, government will protect us, I suppose.
Mm.
And I think this is a good step in the right direction, but it's not. This isn't solving some of the issues we've got. That's for
Yeah.
certain.
Was this always going to be the outcomes that we were going to get in terms of the way that this was set up? And also just in terms of the wider political situation, maybe is it that the Labour government are not in a position to rock the boat
Yeah.
enough?
Oh,
They've not
absolutely.
got
Look
the
at
support
reform would
to.
jump on it, if they suddenly started saying, official climate education, really,
Mm,
really strongly, and I think Becky Francis has done a really good job with a really difficult task. The national curriculum is huge. It's old. Gove had taken a lot of the environmental education out. So she's trying to get it back in. And I think as I say, if we take the positives, there are a lot of positives in this. There's a
mm,
lot of really good, strong language, and there is a plan now, at least, to see that change.
yeah.
Was I ever going to be happy? No, I don't think so. I was looking for revolution, not evolution, and Becky Francis was very clear right on the early stages that this is an evolution.
Mm,
And so what we need to make sure, though, is that it's not another 15 years before change is there. We need to make sure that change is now incremental and happening regularly,
mm,
so that when
yeah.
when your daughters leave school, they will have had more than my kids
Yeah.
had who've just left school.
Yeah. I guess just relating to some of the stuff you were saying before, it's that sense of actually are we going to reach the point where the world has changed so much that we need to adapt quite dramatically to the changing circumstances and the changing situation, that actually education will suddenly need to radically change to incorporate those levels of adaptation that are needed, and that's either both in terms of the infrastructure of the sites, but also in terms of the education that's being given. Are people going to need to have a completely different education because the world will be dramatically different?
And if we look where we were 5 years ago, oh my goodness, we've now got Let's Go Zero, National Education, Nature Park, Climate Ambassadors, Ministry of Eco Education framework. There is loads. And, that's been set into place by organisations such as NAEE, the National Association of Environmental Education and People. That has been there trundling along. And like climate, we are going on an upward slope. There are more and more people, understanding what's needed, but there's still that inertia, and so this is definitely a slight change. We have changed direction very slightly into a more positive destination, but it's really interesting. It's an interesting point in time.
Yeah. Okay, so then as a summary, what are our three key kind of takeaways from this report, this review? I guess is the first one maybe the time frame, that actually this is unearthed. This is going to take a long time. We've got this report now. There's then these kind of enlisting people to be able to then rewrite curriculum and to enact all of these recommendations. But actually, we're only ever going to see this until 2028.
I'd say point two, there's a lot of opportunity to read into this that we want. Teachers in England still have massive amounts of autonomy in most schools. And so you can read this, use that climate lens, use that opportunity for enrichment and active citizenship, and really push that so that we can prepare young people, give them the skills. A lot of mention of skills in this report, and I think that was missing in the last one. It's all about content knowledge. And this is, let's make sure that young people are prepared for the future. So that was a real positive.
Okay. And then maybe the third one is this sense that, well, citizenship is kind of being brought to the fore again, and potentially that's a vehicle to be able to do more of this. So we're not getting every subject, which is what we as an organization and we as what teachers think it's something that needs to go across every single subject. And you might read into it and say there's potential for this, but it's not explicit. Where this really is reprioritized is geography, science, citizenship, and DT. But I guess what we're going to be doing is helping support teachers across every single subject area to weave this in. So it's something that is sort of ubiquitous.
And as people become more and more aware of the climate crisis, maths teachers, if you're feeling that you're concerned, one of the best ways of taking action as a teacher is to incorporate into your lessons. And so, that's my form of climate action. It's worked for me for years. So, I think there's lots to be taken away. There are positives, but still room for improvement, as you might say to a child.
Yeah. I've jumped onto Is the UK Hot right now? And whilst we're recording this, yes, it is very warm. The average difference from normal is plus 4.2 degrees Celsius at the moment in the UK. So,
As I
I'm
say,
sure
it's
everyone
16
is feeling this. It's unusually warm.
And
It's
you still see
weird.
people, what's really funny is you still see people wearing their coats out because it's November, but actually it's not cold. It's nearly as warm as it was in August. Oh, bizarre.
Cool. But
We live
thanks
in
so much.
funny times. No worries. I'll chat to you soon.